Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in on this week's 172nd Air Wing video. Today we have the Royal Saudi Air Force Tornado IDS or Interdictor Strike. This one is in the colors of the Exercise Saudi Sword when they deployed to Lossiemouth, UK in 2007. So hopefully you British fans of the channel can forgive me if I mispronounced Lossiemouth. Certainly you'll probably correct me in the comment section if I have. But anyways, On to the aircraft at hand. This one is in really good colors. I like the fact that it's in the really fetching desert color scheme, and with that, I think it's a good opportunity to talk about the Tornado and its history in regards to the Royal Saudi Air Force. So the Tornado was developed as a consortium between 3 European countries, the countries of Italy, United Kingdom, and Germany. After 2 years of negotiations from 1967 to 1969, the final design was selected and implemented into development through the 1970s. The first flight of the Panavia Tornado IDS took place in 1974, with the first 15 aircraft being built between 1974 and 1979. The initial examples which went into service were delivered in 1980. So the countries that took delivery of the Tornado were all party to the original consortium. So they were, once again, Italy, the United Kingdom, and Germany, plus Saudi Arabia. Now, wait a minute. Those of you that have taken standardized testing kind of know how this is going to go. One of these 4 countries is not like the other here, right? So how is it that the Saudis got their hands on this aircraft despite being not a member of the original consortium that built these? Well, to answer that question, because it's a question I certainly asked when I researched this, we have to go into a little bit of history. So back in the early 20th century, a minor conflict that some of you may have read about in your history books called World War I happened. It was also known as the Great War before World War II happened, and of course World War II was substantially worse than the already horrific World War I, so it kind of lost its appellation as the Great War. But one of the things about World War I, which doesn't necessarily get much traction in today's discussions, is the fact that the world map of great powers was completely rewritten by that conflict, and one of the areas this happened were the borders of the Middle East. For those who don't know, back in the pre-World War I era, one empire essentially ran the entirety of the Middle East, and that empire was called the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire came from the Ottoman Turks, who conquered what was left of the old Eastern Roman/Byzantine Empire, and by the time of the early 20th century, the Ottoman Empire had begun to take on a reputation of being old and out of fashion. So during World War I, they made the geopolitical mistake of partnering with the Kaiser of Germany, and that didn't turn out too well for the old Ottoman Empire. So with the Ottoman Empire out of action, that left large areas of the Middle East suddenly up for grabs in terms of governance, and a tribe founded and headed by the leader known as Ibn Saud partnered with then the British Empire to align against the Ottomans in the event of a Allied victory in World War I, which took place. So with the Ottomans no longer running Saudi Arabia and controlling Mecca, the Ibn Saud family took over, and so far it has been the longest running family business, you might say, of that region since the early 20th century. So the Ibn Saud family is still running the show even now, and as part of that geopolitical partnership way back in the dusty beginnings of the 20th century, the United Kingdom makes sure that whenever they produce or buy, really both, the latest generation technology that they have access to, the Saudis always get an opportunity to get a piece of the action themselves. So much like we see with the Saudis ordering the Royal Air Force Typhoon, when the Panavia Tornado came out, they got a crack at those too. So this is how, in a roundabout way, the Saudis got their hands on what was at the time one of the more capable ground attack, deep interdiction, ground/close air support airplanes of its time. And the Tornado could carry just about everything that a U.S. Air Force interdiction airplane like an F-15 or an F-4 could carry. So AGM-65s, laser-guided bombs, snake eyes, even some customized munitions like runway and mining denial bombs, which the British used in Operation Granby. Us Yanks know that better as Operation Desert Storm. So a lot of weapons that could be carried on these. Plus they did other jobs like electronic warfare and reconnaissance, which we won't get into since I don't believe the Saudi versions ever took on those roles. The Saudi versions have gone on to serve in many conflicts. These are now, or I should say they used to be, the Saudi intervention in Yemen recently concluded, but they were used as ground attack platforms in that war. I will say no further of that subject because that is a controversial topic to say the least. And unfortunately, one of these Saudi tornadoes was shot down by Houthi rebels who apparently used a jury-rigged Russian R-27T air-to-air missile. And when I say jury-rigged, I mean they bolted it to a truck and used it as a Home Depot level surface-to-air missile. So kind of interesting how they cobbled that together, but hey, such is the name of things. So I'm sure that came up in the Saudi debrief when they came to understand that yes, the Houthis now apparently have SAMs, they just made them themselves. And the R-27 missiles were leftover stock back when the Yemeni Air Force was a Soviet client state. So they had all these R-27 air-to-air missiles laying around, and apparently they stuck some duct tape and a couple of welded rails to a pickup truck and launched one of them at a Saudi tornado, much to that crew's eventual chagrin. So the Saudi tornadoes have seen quite a bit of action. As I understand it, they also have seen some action in fighting Islamic State activity within Saudi's large borders, but I was unable to find much more confirmed specifics on that subject, probably for obvious reasons. So with that, we'll move on to the model at hand, which I think is actually really good. I'll start off by going through the pros and then we'll talk to the cons. The pros, I love the fact that they fixed the tailplanes on this. I have a Corgi Royal Air Force Tornado. That was the first one that I purchased of the Tornado IDS series. So I'll pause by asking the group here. Those of you out there, are you all aware of a 1/72nd scale die-cast version of the Tornado ADF, which is the air defense variant? I haven't found one in my research, but I'm sure those of you in the comment section with access to that information, please let me know if you know of a manufacturer that made a good one, because I'd like to get one on the channel to review. That would seem to be a pretty good option, I think, to talk through in comparison to the IDS. But anyways, back to the IDS here. Corgi did produce an Interdictor Strike 1/72nd scale version, which is the first one that I ever ordered. And that one has movable tailplanes right here, which on the Tornado, not a good thing, because you would think that movable tailplanes are a nice feature, except when the wings are swept back on the Tornado, that doesn't give you much real estate on the model to really handle it. You've got this really big fin, which is large because one of the characteristics of swing wing designs are if the body of the aircraft is at a higher angle of attack, what can happen is the wing glove that you have to have here to accommodate the swing wing variable geometry mechanism can block airflow to the rudder, which then leads to a situation where the swing wing aircraft can enter a yaw and snap roll or go out of control. This happened to be an aerodynamic issue that plagued the MiG-23 Flogger for its entire service career. The Russians eventually had to build in a flight limiter system to alleviate the spin stall condition. Meanwhile, for those of you who may not know this, the original very first design studies of the F-14 Tomcat actually had a single tail, just like you see on this Tornado IDS. They moved away from the single tail to the twin tail because of yaw stability issues with the wing glove, again, blocking the airflow to the rudder and causing the airplane to enter what the pilots might call uncontrolled flight, aka change your underpants if you make it to the ground in one piece. So because of those instability issues, many swing wing designs either have twin tails or, like you see with this Tornado IDS, you've got this very big fin over here. So in case you didn't know, that's why the Tornado has a really big horizontal, or I should say vertical stabilizer here. So back to the rudders, or I should say the horizontal stabs here. So these don't move on the HobbyMaster model, which is great because now I can display this with using the horizontal stabs here as a surface to put a stand on, and it obviously sits and looks really well. So unfortunately for modeling purposes, the bottom of the Tornado, there's not much real estate under here to put a stand, because if you have like bombs or the rails, this surface is occupied by stuff, right? The bottom of the airplane has stuff hanging down from it. So you can't really put a stand under there. And if you have the wings fully back and items on the pylon, you just don't have real estate to put a stand or, you know, prongs of a stand underneath there either. So there's not much real estate except basically what you see here, which is the horizontal stabs and the nose of the airplane. So bravo to HobbyMaster for fixing the horizontal stabs in position, because otherwise displaying this would be real tricky. Another good thing that I liked that what they did, and I'll talk more to this if and when I can get my comparison video between this Tornado and the Royal Air Force one sometime next spring, I'm sure, is where the wing glove is. If you notice, there's a little silver part there, and there's a little keyhole, and that's where the HobbyMaster accessory key that you get with their models fits into. There's two little silver parts, one of which you see installed right here, and what that does is it fills in the gap between the wing and the rest of the fuselage. So when you have it in the forward position, it's not just a gaping hole. You can actually just put a silver part there and it finishes the model really well. Once again, good job on HobbyMaster for including that. I would have liked to see that on the F-111s, because that happens to be one of the drawbacks to that design. The way HobbyMaster does it is, unless you have the wings all the way forward, there's a gap in the fuselage. It's just black and huge, and it's not a good time for me to look at. But I mean, it's not such a deal breaker that I don't like the model or won't display it, but it is one of those things where I look at and go, oh, that could have been done better. And I'm glad to see that HobbyMaster has taken that same thought and improved the Tornado IDS tooling here. So other good benefits of the IDS setup. So the parts fit was pretty good. I did have one pylon on the left side that was a little loose. I just put some blue tack on the top of the rail and it seemed to fix it. But the rest of the parts fit really well. They're nice, they're tight. They're not so tight that you feel like you're gonna break it by putting them in, but they're loose enough that you can pull them out without feeling like you're ripping parts out of the airplane. The small details like the Arabic inscription on the front for Royal Saudi Air Force on both sides, it's really well done. It's not washed out or weird. It's crisp even if you zoom in on it. The insignias like the Saudi flag and the aircraft serial, which you'll see right here and right here, are all really crisp. Some of the labels for the aft stabilator travel and the warning labels and markings are really crisp. They're not washed out like you see on some of the Corgi releases, and the cockpit is done really well. So the navigator position here, you see really clear. They're not CRTs, but they're kind of a blend between cathode ray tubes and some of the modern MFDs on newer aircraft, but it's done really well, and I like the detail of it. Once again, that's an improvement over the Corgi, which uses some older tooling, so the cockpit isn't quite as detailed. The vents are really well done. The vents actually are open to the intake, which I like. I would have liked to see that on HobbyMaster's F-14, but I'm glad to see again that they've taken that as an improvement item on the Tornado IDS and incorporated that there. So these aren't painted over, they're actually pass-through, so you can look through these into the intake, which is really good. I do happen to like that. And the accessories. So you do get a set of naked quote-unquote pylons with the aircraft. So you get a set which has bonds on them, and you get a set which has it's just the regular pylon there, so there's nothing on them. You can put these underneath the Tornado, and I should actually change this so that it's in the right orientation. So if you look at the airplane where it's at now, this would roughly fit kind of under there. Basically, right now I have ones with the bombs underneath installed. So you would just put this in place of that, and you would have empty rails, which is really nice. I like that touch, and I hope that HobbyMaster keeps doing that on some of their later releases, because let's be honest, most airplanes that you see, they don't generally have just loaded down with weapons all the time, right? Most of the time when aircraft are operating, some of the rails are occupied and some aren't, right? You got a fuel tank, an AIM-9, maybe a practice bomb, but they're not always loaded for bear all the time, right? So it seems a little over the top to me to have a die-cast model that has every pylon and every rail loaded with bombs all the time, because then it just looks, it just looks like you're putting too much. Even in wartime, usually air forces don't load their airplanes to the max. Generally, they will preserve some empty real estate for targeting pods or fuel tanks or something to that effect. So glad to see again that HobbyMaster incorporated that empty pylon that you could use. So some of the drawbacks with this release, the first is the wings do not go all the way forward. They terminate in probably, I would say, like a 20-degree setting. So instead of the wings being all the way forward like you would get on, say, the Corgi Tornado, with these, the wings stop at like maybe 20 degrees. So not quite fully forward as you would expect, which is kind of a bummer. I would have liked to see it fully forward like you do with the MiG-23 and the F-14 and the Corgi Tornadoes. Not sure why they had to do it this way. I don't know, maybe there was a engineering constraint, or maybe Corgi has a patent they had to dance around, I'm not sure. But that would have been nice to see if they had that. The ordnance load that you get with this model is also a bit stingy in my opinion. You don't get a really comprehensive set of weapons. You just get couple of these air-to-ground missiles on the end of the pylon, and you just get a couple of these, and then the fuel tanks with the AIM-9s on the inside, bombs on the bottom rail. You can kind of see one right over here, and there's like two on each side, so there's one there behind all this. So you get 4 bombs on the center line, left and right center line, and that's it. There's no laser guided bombs, there's no targeting pod. And I would have liked to see that, because those are the weapons that these Tornadoes used when they were deployed in Yemen. So that would have been good to include in this release. So unfortunately, we don't see that with this example. So the other, I'm not going to say this is a con, but it is something to be aware of. The canopy on the HobbyMaster Tornadoes is a bit fussy. It's similar to what they do on their F-16s. Which it works okay once you get the hang of it. But essentially what you have to do is you have to take your fingers, take the canopy and flip it up like you normally would. But if you want it to stay up, you have to then pull it forward towards the nose of the airplane. And then once it's in its second detent position, you can take the canopy fully back to like more of a resting open angle, and then you can display it with the canopy open, and it'll remain that way. And then you just have to reverse that process to close the canopy fully as well. So again, I wouldn't call that a con, but it is something to be aware of, so that you're not fumbling with this thing for 20 minutes trying to figure out how to keep it open. And if you're not familiar with HobbyMaster, or if this is your first HobbyMaster model, that might throw you a curveball if you're not aware of it. So overall, I think it's really good. Because of the color scheme, the Tornado's long service history, it's still in use. The Royal Air Force has retired theirs in favor of the new Typhoon and the F-35B. However, I believe the Germans are still operating theirs, although as the news has it at this point, I think they're going to replace their Tornadoes with F-35s. They were going to replace them with F-18s, but then that changed to the Joint Strike Fighter. And I think Italy is also doing the same thing. They are getting ready to replace their Tornadoes with the Joint Strike Fighter as well. So yeah, the Tornado right now is still in business, still out there, still doing things and serving, and is still going to generate various stories in the future. So there are some really good podcast episodes featuring the Tornado. Many radar officers and pilots of the Tornado and Royal Air Force Service have got some great interviews. Quite a few of them are on the I think one or two are on the 10% True podcast. Another one is the Aircrew Interview podcast. Both of them have excellent Tornado reviews and interviews that you should definitely check out if you want to understand more of what it's like. So far, none of them have a Saudi pilot yet, but I imagine that'll probably change with time. So once we get a little further away from this unpleasantness in Yemen. So with that, we will wrap the video here. Thank you all for watching. If you've watched to this point, consider subscribing and checking out my other content. All of the videos in my stable are of models that I personally own, so I do not review models from retailers and manufacturers. No one sends me stuff to look at. This is all my personal collection. So thank you again for your time and watching my videos, and consider subscribing again so that you can be notified when I release my next video. So with that, thank you all to my current subscribers for your support, and it is definitely appreciated as we head into the holidays, and you all have a good one. Thank you again for watching.